Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mother Hustlers, the podcast. And today we have the pleasure of having with us Eli Stang. And on today's episode, we're actually going to be discussing finding your passion amidst parenthood. So just kind of following your dream, even though you have the kids and the whole shebang. So that's what we're going to be diving into today. And I'll give Eli a chance to introduce herself to the audience, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be on the podcast. And just a little bit about me. I have a photography studio downtown Toronto, and I mostly photograph brands and artists. So a lot of new launches, a lot of new brands, as well as a lot of established brands as well. And then same thing for artists. I also shoot just like lots of people that just want to come in and have a photo shoot, but definitely I'm more of a fashion photographer. So my focus is more on brands and artists, and I just love to come in and create. So I've been doing that for a few years here in Toronto, and I'm originally from Calgary. So
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. We're so excited to jump into the conversation because it's such an important one. Because I feel like as moms or as parents in general, when we have kids, we kind of get tunnel vision. And sometimes it's hard for us to see our lives beyond being moms and following our dreams. So it's really a conversation that is near and dear to my heart. And I'm so happy to be having it with you today. So we'll start off. And can you share your personal journey of transitioning from a stay-at-home mom to pursuing your passion? Like, what were the key moments or realizations that kind of led you to this shift in your life? Because that's a big shift, right?
yeah, it's huge. It's massive. So I'm a very extreme person, and I'm a very impulsive person. And so staying home with my kids was probably easily the most incredible experience that I've had. And I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years with them exclusively.
Wow.
And I think for me, I always knew it was almost like as soon as I got pregnant with my son, like nothing existed. Like photography didn't exist. And it was always my lifelong passion, you know? But I think I know myself that it's difficult for me to balance. So I was
Fair
just
enough.
full on mom, and that's all it was. There was no future outside of my kids growing up. Like
That
there
tunnel
was
vision.
exactly, there was no thought ever to what would happen when they were that age. Cause I don't even think I was like capable of like thinking about life without, them being
Right.
with me all the time. And so it wasn't until it was actually a little bit of an interesting story and kind of like a snowball effect. But my husband worked up north, so I was alone with the kids a lot, and which I think was even kind of like intensified those feelings for me of just being with me and the kids. And then he ended up having an accident and cutting his fingers off. And he ended up back in the city, which was like a blessing for like all of us. And the kids started growing up, and we started just kind of like really drastically kind of changing our lifestyle. And I was on a road trip with my kids and their friend in BC. I was in Kimberley, this little tiny BC town. And I remember so vividly, we were like at the creek and just kind of hanging out. And my husband called me and was like, I keep dropping like these windows, like basically like he was working as a carpenter. He's like, I keep dropping these
Right.
things with my fingers. And he was just like, I don't know what we're going to do. And in my head, I was just like, okay, it's over for me. Like in the sense of I'm no longer going to be a full-time stay-at-home mom. Like I have to get a
Right.
job. And I panicked. And it was like, I had like a mental breakdown. And I was driving through the mountains, and the kids are all in the back listening to music. And I remember just like gripping the steering wheel, and in my head, like I'm thinking, do I go back and be a nurse? Do I like, what do I do? What do I do? And I wasn't even like thinking of photography, because I'm just thinking, I need quick money. I need something now.
Yeah. I can
And
only
my
imagine.
daughter was like 9 years old, and she's in the back seat. And all of a sudden I hear her say, Mom, like, why don't you open a photography studio? That's your dream.
Aw.
And I just like was like, it was like in me at that moment. Like it was like everything just like stopped, and it was just like in me. And I was like, it was, I can't even describe to you the feeling, but it was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like, who are you? Like, yes. And it was like, she actually like read my mind. Like, it was the most crazy experience. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And she was like, we're grown, mom. Like, you done a great job. Like, all this stuff. Like, it's now your
Oh,
time to like make this happen. And they were just such
yeah.
like, I was just like, okay. And my whole trip back to Calgary from BC, I just was thinking, it's my time to now jump back into that. And it was like a very emotional time, and it was a very
I know. I was just about to
powerful
say
time.
that is such an emotional story. Like my eyes got a little bit misty when you said like your daughter said that, because what a testament to the job that you've done as a parent, right? That she could tell you like, listen, you've done such a good job. Like now it's your turn now, basically. That's awesome. But sometimes these big decisions tend to come out of like moments of crisis where we're in our lives and we're like, oh my God, I need to do something. Something's got to give to make all
Totally.
the pieces come together. So, it's unfortunate that that happened to your husband and those were the circumstances that led to it. But how beautiful is it that your daughter kind of reminded you of like where you started and where you should be going, what you should be going back to. So that's such a
100%.
beautiful moment. And like it resonates with me in so many ways. And I'm sure it'll resonate with the audience too. How did your role as a mother influence your decision to pursue your dreams? I know like your daughter kind of gave you like the kick in your butt, but did you find that being a mom influenced it in any other way? And were there certain aspects of parenthood that may have inspired you to take the leap? I know like you were kind of in crisis, but was there anything else that kind of made you go over the edge?
Yeah, totally. Every time I don't know what to do with my life, or even with like a situation, from like the big picture all the way down to the small picture, I always try to think like, what advice would I give my kids if they came to me and asked me that? And I think that like my son is super, super musical. He's very artsy and like talented in that way. And my daughter is just like this super driven, um, like little bulldozer. And I was like, I was trying to ask myself, like, what would I tell my kids, like, as they grow up? And I want them to be courageous in doing whatever that they want to do, and like really live from a place of like love and not a fearful place. And so for me, taking something on that actually really scared me because I needed to help provide, and
Yeah,
I'm taking on something that doesn't really have like any, solid.
guarantee. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So a lot of it was me like honestly really wanting to model that for my kids and just be like, look, like you have to follow your dreams, and there's a million people that are going to tell you that, you can't make money at this or you can't do that, but like it's just so important to follow what you love. And so I think me trying to teach that to my kids their whole lives, it was like, push came to shove, and I had to like walk the walk too. I had to show them that. And
Yeah.
I just really wanted to empower them and have them see that you can really do whatever you want.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's an important lesson. I feel as parents that so many times we want to shelter our kids, and sometimes we bubble wrap them and we don't prepare them for life in the sense that like things won't always be perfect. So I think this is a wonderful lesson in showing them that like, listen, you can have a dream. You can even chase that dream, but it might be scary. Things may go wrong. It may not be like a straight and narrow path. There's bumps, curves, whatnot in the road. And I think that's so important to not only like preach to our kids, but like you said, to walk the walk, because we
Mhm.
have to prepare them for a life that even if they're following their dreams, at times might get hard sometimes. And they might have to work a little bit harder, put in a little bit more effort to achieve that dream. And to see their mom, to see you do that, that's such an awesome lesson to see like in real time happening before them.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. I feel like I learned probably more than what I was trying to teach. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Like,
yeah,
just, yeah, yeah.
I can imagine. I mean, parenthood is a lesson in and of itself, and then you add entrepreneurship into the mix, and wow. That's a hell of a lesson, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I agree with you on the sheltering because, like if our kids grow up thinking like, "Oh, you never went through that, like everything was so easy for you." It's really difficult for them to know that they can A, come to you when they're struggling, and B, they think something's wrong with them when it's not
Yeah.
always easy. And I wanted them to see that as well. Like I definitely don't hide that. Like when I'm
Yep.
struggling, even when I'm like doubting myself, when I came home crying the other day and I like sat on the couch and uh, I I think it's so important to like tell your kids, talk to them about it because we're human, and I think it actually makes our kids more courageous
Yeah,
to
it
be
does.
authentic themselves, and take those risks.
It makes them courageous, but I think it also makes them resilient. Like my 7-year-old, he's soon to be 8, he has big emotions. And when things don't go perfectly, oh, like he feels it so
Feels
deep.
it.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
And the conversation that we have to have with him so often is like, listen, it's okay to have all these feelings. It's okay to have all these emotions, right? But
Hmm.
how are you going to channel that? Like, what are you going to do with it? Are you just going to sit here and be like super upset or super sad and like wallow in it? Or are you going to take the lesson and like do something with that? So that's
You are
something
such a good mom. I love
I
that. I love hearing that.
I try. So now when we think about this, you're going on the journey, you're opening the studio. So now you're balancing parenthood and your personal
Mhm.
aspiration. And I imagine that can be challenging. So what kind of
Yeah.
approach did you take to kind of manage it all and kind of balance that?
I made a lot of mistakes. And again, just like talking to my kids, it was a lot of communication because I think a lot of guilt and trying to balance things comes a lot from ourselves. Like we project a lot
Yeah.
of it. But
Hmm.
it's also like important to express that. Just like your son, I feel things very big. And so I remember when we first moved to Toronto and I opened my first studio, I was working only 3 days a week out of the house. And it was like destroying me just from the standpoint of feeling like I wasn't at home to tuck my kids in and all of this. They were fine. But for me, I felt like it was so unbalanced and I felt bad.
Right.
And it was honestly just a lot of communication being like, "Hey, like how do you guys feel about this? Like what's been going on? Let's talk about this." And they were just like, "No, it's great." Like to be honest, it actually really helped my husband's relationship with my kids as well.
I can
Like
imagine. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, "Wow, okay, it was actually great for everybody." And I became as I got more used to the balance and actually started working more and more and more, we just found really creative ways to all spend time together. My second
Oh.
studio, I felt so grateful. I had it joined with my godson and another friend of ours, and they had a vintage shop in the front, and I had my studio in the back. So my kids would hang out there a lot and like kind of
Oh, that's
go to the
awesome.
pool and then have a lemonade stand in front of the studio. So we made just like creative ways to just kind of still hang out together while we were working. I try to make my kids kind of a bit of a part of my work. I want them to feel at home and feel like they can stop by the studio and like it's kind of a benefit for them that their mom's a photographer with a studio. Like my daughter had a photo shoot birthday party. So we just
Oh,
try to
that's
kind of make it
awesome.
fun. Totally. It was so fun. And then just like really taking that time, with my son or my daughter's like, hey, like, I haven't seen you in the last couple of days. It's been so busy. It's like 100% like, let's go on a date. And there's lots of times where I will fully blow off work. I spend the day with just them. And then I'm up all night editing after they go to sleep. And that's just the sacrifices we make. But I feel
Yeah.
better doing that. You know what I mean? So it's just
Yeah.
I think it's just that balance in that moment almost, and it has to change moment to moment.
Yeah. You know what? Mom guilt is so real because no
Yeah.
matter how independent we tell ourselves that we are, and no matter how much we say we're going to do this and we're going to do that, there's always that like lingering feeling in the back of your mind while you're doing something else. Like, I wonder what my kids are doing. Is everybody okay? How are they
Yeah.
feeling? Did they eat? You know?
Yeah.
And it's
Totally.
so hard to overcome. Like I work from home, so I spend a lot of time with my kids. which is like a positive of having that. But the moments where I've had to go to events or like be away from home for a day or two, I call constantly.
Yeah. And they're like, we're
Like
fine.
yeah, I trust my hubby implicitly. Like he's a great father. I couldn't have asked for better. But I'll still call and be like, "Hey, did he eat dinner? Did he get to bed on time?" And it's just like I just need to know. I know it's happened.
Yeah.
I know it's
Yeah.
happened, but I just need that reassurance to make me feel better about the decision to be away. And
Totally.
I it just kind of racks at you. So like I applaud you for finding really creative ways to keep your kids engaged because it is hard, especially in like the way that the world is set up right now. Like the standard of living is constantly rising, the cost of living is rising, and we got to grind so much to kind of make ends meet and to have the lifestyles that we want to have, right? So
Yeah.
when you have to be away from your kids for even the shortest amount of time, it's hard. So finding those nice cool ways to kind of balance it and keep them involved and make it like a family effort, that's awesome. And I love like what you said about the dates, you know, having those dates. We took our son on a date this weekend and he was like, it's not a date.
Aw,
But it's
how old is your son?
my oldest, he's 7, but it was like me, his dad, and him. And his line was, it's not a son date. You and daddy are going on a date, and I'm just here for support and food.
No way. Oh my gosh, that is so cute.
But
Oh,
we try to do stuff like that with him because in our situation, like I just had a baby a little over a year ago. So you bring in
wow,
a baby into the
congratulations.
dynamic. Thank you. After having
Yeah,
one child for like 6 years, you start realizing like, oh, I gotta make time and show them that it's not all about work and that everybody has special time and they matter. So I love how
totally.
you are balancing career and motherhood and showing your kids that they matter and they're a part of things.
Thank you.
Now, your kids sound very special and very creative and independent, and I love that. I love it. I love how you describe their personalities. And I know you mentioned that your daughter was kind of like a driving force and saying like, "Hey, mom, why don't you do this? Like, we got this. We're good. Go ahead, get your chase your dreams." Are there any other
Yeah.
ways that your kids are like encouraging and supporting you as you pursue your dreams? And like, is there anything that stands out aside from that one defining moment?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like they just amaze me. Like, okay, so one, I used to live in Calgary and we were basically there just because I wanted to be close to family, but it was never a long-term place for me. And I came to Toronto to visit my husband who was working here. And same thing, my daughter was just like, why are we living here? You know, like I know you don't want to live here. You're gonna grow up one day and you're gonna
I
regret your
love
life and
her.
blah blah. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I like she cuts deep. Like she cuts so deep. And
I love the
she's
honesty
but
though.
oh my gosh, it's the best thing. She's like such an inspiration for me. And it's all facts, you know? And she's constantly making me question like my life. And we upped and moved. Like that girl got us up and moving in a month and a half. We like sold everything, moved to Toronto. And I just feel like both my kids they're just like incredibly encouraging. Like my son, I was at a shoot the other day and my son, I literally look at my text message. He's off this week for exams and he's in grade 10. And I get this message that says, hey mom, I'm up. It's like 12:30, but he's like, hey, I'm up. How can I help you today? And I'm just like, wow,
Oh,
like it's really cool like seeing how they've taken on a lot of responsibility. Like, you know, they have my debit card and I'm constantly texting them grocery lists like, oh yeah, go get groceries, and they go get groceries together, and it's a really cool thing for them to like do together, and they cart them home, you know. And my son walks our two big dogs like every day now, and they've just taken so much responsibility on, but that part never made me feel guilty. Like I always thought this is really good for them because they have their free time, but they've
absolutely.
really like shown how resilient and responsible and independent they are. And I think it's been a huge help for them. And then I always tell them like the responsibility that you guys are taking on and the way that you guys are like showing up for our family is so encouraging for me to like keep going and doing what I'm doing. You know what I mean? And they're just
Yeah.
always like, I told you I was crying the other day. Like I was so drained and I was like on the couch, like so teary. And my son was like, I made a song the other day and like I had worked on it for like 10 hours. And I was just like, this song sucks. And it was so tough, but you just got to like clear your head and like just keep going. You just got to keep going. And I'm like
That's
listening to my
beautiful.
like son's advice. And I'm like, you guys are just like, they really are. They're just, I can't even like put into words, but I don't think I could do it if I felt in any way that they were suffering from me taking on this job. But all I've seen is
Right.
honestly pluses. Like that's, yeah,
we had an
yeah,
we had an episode recently where we talked about, having a support system and needing a support system in order to balance career, personal life, and just having kids, like parenthood. And one of the things we kind of mentioned in the episode was how sometimes your kids become part of the support system because
oh,
they just start
totally.
taking on certain roles in the family as they get older. They're able to help out with some of the chores a little bit. And it's funny because, sometimes as a kid, you see chores as, oh my God, why do I have to do this? But there are other defining moments when kids actually see chores as, oh wow, like I'm growing up and like I'm contributing and like I'm helping out, and
Totally.
like it has a positive impact on their psyche, but it also prepares them for life on their own,
For
right? Because
life.
eventually,
Yeah.
yeah, eventually they leave the nest. As much as we probably don't want that to happen,
Mhm.
um, they eventually leave the nest. So them learning to do a few things, a few chores around the house, and like having your kids help with the grocery shopping, like that's awesome, because that is
Yeah.
something, that's a skill that they need in life, right? So it's
Yeah.
great that they support you and support the family in these
Yeah.
nice ways, like, and it's cool that they contribute in that way where like you said, it doesn't take away from their fun times and their times for themselves, but it's just knowing that they're supporting you and supporting the family. I like that. I like
Yeah.
when the
And
family can come together and make things happen.
totally. And you can just see how good they feel about it. Like they feel so grown up. And yeah, they're just the advice that they give me is like so wise. Like I'm just like,
but
who raised you? Like I love it.
but
Like
that's
they're just
exactly it,
like,
right?
wow. Yeah.
But that's exactly it. Like I remember being in my early 20s when sometimes like my mom would question my decisions, and I would always kind of turn it back on her, and I'm like, "Were you a good mom? Like do you think you were a
Yeah.
good mom?" And she'd be like, "Yeah." So then I'm like, "Well, trust in the fact that you were a good mom and that like
Oh
I'm
my
doing the
gosh.
right thing because I've learned from
Yeah.
you." So your kids
I
are a
love
testament
that.
from that, right? They're literally
Totally.
a
My son
testament to
uses
that.
Totally. He says that a lot to me. He's like, look, you've taught me these things. Now trust me, like I can do this. I can make these decisions.
Yes.
I can, and it's just like,
Yep.
yeah, like you really can. And you show me that daily. So like, I love that you said that too, Mom. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
true. So
Because as
true.
parents, sometimes we don't realize because it's in our nature to nurture, right? And we want to hold on to our babies as long as possible. But sometimes you got to take a step back and be like, I did that.
Yeah, totally. I
Like
love that.
take credit for your work. Take credit for your work because it's not
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not easy. Now, when we talk about, like, we're talking about your kids being a part of the support system, and like, obviously, we've mentioned parenthood comes with sometimes a sense of guilt. Like, we feel that mom guilt when we focus on ourselves. What helped you with like navigating that guilt, and outside of your kids and obviously your husband? Did you have a support system that kind of helped you when it came to balancing things and allowing you to focus on both?
Yeah, I think, okay, so yes and no. So we have the most incredible support system and a really, really close family. And
That's good.
I moved everyone away from that. Like as soon as I started my studio, we like moved across the country. So we like didn't know anyone. We came here and didn't have any support system. So
Right.
that was like, a little bit challenging because, yeah, my family, like, we were all so tight, all lived like, within walking distance of each other. But so that definitely was challenging. But honestly, like, they even stepped up from afar. Like, my kids knew at any time they can like call my mom, my brother, like, their cousins, all of that. And that was like really helpful knowing that, we're still always there for each other. And then we started to really like make community here, which was so
That's awesome.
essential. My godson became my godson here, and he like really, and a lot of my friends too, just like really kind of became part of our family. And my kids learned that no matter where you go in the world, you get to create your family as well. And so that was like probably number one. Community is like incredibly important to me. And then I also think experience, in the sense that I think that we, like you said earlier, we try to shelter our kids. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of times we don't give them enough credit. And
That's
oftentimes it
true.
hurts their resiliency. So I know when I grew up, my mom was like amazing. Like, she was just like such an inspiration for me. And my parents were divorced, and my dad, he started. I always think about him because he started a studio, like a martial arts studio, when I was 10.
Mm.
And I watched him like build this business. And there were times where we were like living out of the studio. Like, he like literally he would, as a business goes, like, you have to make sacrifices. And I remember him
Right.
having guilt because the only time we saw him was if we took classes. So I would take like 4 martial arts classes like a day to
Oh.
like hang out with him and see him, because he like had to basically live at his martial arts studio.
Right.
And I look back and it's some of my favorite times. Like, I'm sure at some point he
Yeah.
probably felt guilty. Like, oh, I can't take my kids on vacation. Oh, I'm always at the studio till like midnight. And I remember sleeping on the mats, and just like waking up and like watching him teach, and sitting at the desk and answering phones. And like, it didn't hurt me. Like, it didn't. And I think, if anything, it actually gave me so much of my courage, like watching him fearlessly start a business. And now it's like, it's so successful, and he's changed so many lives. And for
Yeah.
me, I got to see the struggle, you know? So
Yeah.
I think having that experience was kind of an internal support network, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You said a few important things. Number one, I loved what you said about community because like I wasn't born and raised in Canada. I came from another country and a lot of my family doesn't live in Canada. So you quickly learn, like you did relocating across the country, that sometimes your community can become your family. You find those good
Mhm.
friends, those good neighbors that become such an integral part of your support system that they are like your family, right? And it's so important
Totally.
for people not to close themselves off to those experiences because there's so
Yeah.
much family that you might be missing out on because you're not opening up your eyes to who's right in front of you and who's surrounding you directly in your community. So that's such an important point to bring up. The
Yeah.
other point that you brought up was like the resiliency in terms of parenting and like how you raise your kids. And I think it's so important to recognize that parenting isn't a linear path. There really is no perfect way to do it and everybody's journey will be slightly different. So you might have the entrepreneurs who involve their kids in the business and those become some like core memories and you might have families where like going on summer vacation every year is a core memory. But once you're showing love and spending that time together, I think that's the most important thing, no matter what form it shows up in, so long as there's like a positive experience to be had. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I actually love the way that you put that. And it's so true, because it doesn't really matter what your situation is, as long as like your
Yeah.
time is like meaningful. And I
Yeah.
remember my husband, when he worked away, he was gone for like 8 weeks at a time. And I used to tell my kids, like, yes, your dad's not here to put you to sleep every night, but when he's home, it's all about you for like a week.
Yeah.
So really, time is like arbitrary, you know what I mean? And then when he
Yep.
was home, every night. It's like, yeah, but now your dad's home to put you to sleep every night. And like, yeah, we don't have like a week straight with him, but we have these moments every night. And so it's all, there's no right or wrong, and there's no better or worse. It's literally like, when you are with your family, how are you spending that time, you know? Like,
Yeah, how are
you
you
make it
showing that
meaningful,
love?
you make it count. Exactly. I love that you brought that up. It's so true. Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
and how that's expressed and like how that time spent, because like for me, I mean, talking about my family, my siblings, they live back home in St. Kitts. I have some siblings who live in the States, and we don't see, like, I don't, sorry, I should say I don't get to see them very often. It might be in some instances once a year or like every couple of years or whatever the case may be, but we talk on a regular basis, and having those conversations and them making time in their day to, have a chat with me, have a joke, have a kiki, I feel the
Yeah.
love even though I'm not around them constantly. And like, I know, regardless of being in their presence all the time, that like they will go to bat for me. And I think that's what we have to instill in our kids, because they're in our care for, 18 years or more, but at some point they leave the nest, and they need to understand that even though you're not underneath my roof anymore, I still love you. I still care about you. I still think about you 24/7, and like I will go to bat for you. I will die for you. And I try to explain that to my son, my 7-year-old, all the time. I tell him, at some point you're going to have your own family that's going to take priority over mommy and daddy. And that's okay, because mommy and daddy are going to love you anyway. And like, you can
I
come
love that.
visit, you could come home, we're not going to see each other every day, but whenever you want to see us or talk to us, we'll try to make ourselves available. And even if you don't see us, the love's still there. Like, that never goes away. You're always my baby. I tell them that even when you're 50, even when you're 80, you're still my baby.
Yeah.
So don't, I try to get him to
So
understand that love is really the feeling. It's not necessarily the physical presence. It's about how we show that feeling and how we make sure that person understands. Like, there's so much to the dynamic, because somebody could be around you physically every single day and you still don't feel loved, right?
100%. Yeah, I love that you're sharing that with your son now, because it really does create like this fearless idea of him growing up. Like, he already knows that his choices, he's still loved. And I
Yeah.
think that a lot of kids do worry about that, like what happens when I move away? It's like, what happens when I have my own family? Or even like as I grow older and I'm not a baby anymore, do you miss me when I was a baby? You don't love me? You know what I mean? And you
Yeah.
sharing that with him is like, what an amazing thing for him to feel at such a young age. Yeah.
Well, I wanted him to understand, because one day I alluded to the fact that we wouldn't live together when he was an adult. And he was like, "What? I don't get to live with you for my
Oh,
entire life?" And I was like, "No, you don't." And he's like, "What?" And it was the
oh,
concept was so scary to him. Like, what? Like, you
yeah,
don't take care of me for the rest of my life? So I had to like break it down to him in a way. Like, I don't live with my mommy anymore, but I still love
yeah.
her. She visits us. We talk to her every Sunday. So just kind of getting him to understand that concept, because you want them to know that no matter what, whether I'm chasing my dreams, whether I'm at work, that the love is ever present and it never goes away, no matter what. So just making sure they have that.
I
Now,
love that. Yeah.
finding one's passion obviously can be a journey in and of itself. So you mentioned that you kind of did photography before you became a mom. Was
Mhm.
it with photography, was it something that just kind of came naturally, or did you fall into it? Like, how did you even get involved in photography to begin with?
I think it was honestly like just really natural. Like, as a kid, I had just always had a camera with me, always was just wanting to take pictures of people's faces. My wall was always covered with like pictures of my friends, and it had a million photo albums. And it was just always something that I was like very drawn to. I think like even in just the way that I expressed myself, I really loved like visuals. I always saw things in my head and then struggled to figure out how to like use words to explain it to people. And my like phrase was always like, I wish I could just put you in my head and you could just like see it, you know? So I think I like loved the idea that I could capture that and then I could make
Yeah.
people feel certain things. So it was always that way. And I traveled like a whole bunch, and my camera was never without me. I traveled through Australia and it was just like cameras, film, marshmallows in my backpack and like as like a older teenager. And then I ended up as a photojournalist in China, and I just like
Oh,
really
wow.
love to travel, and I love people. I love connection, and so photography is like a really great way for me to connect with people as well. And then I was in art school for photography, and I ended up pregnant with my son. And so I dropped
Hmm.
out, and after that, it was like I was just kind of self-taught after that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, like I always thought other things too, like, oh, maybe like nursing was always like something that I really thought was
Hmm.
cool because I love fast-paced environments. I always imagined I could like work in emergency and like help people. But photography was like just my heart. Like it was just like a part of who I was, like really deeply, I
So,
feel.
as somebody who I would say you found your passion, like photography's been calling to you all this
Hmm.
time, even before you became a mother, what
Hmm.
advice would you give to someone who was looking to kind of find their passion? And then that's not even just strictly to parent people who are parents or moms.
Hmm.
Just what advice would you give in general about helping somebody help themselves find their passion?
Yeah, that's like such a good question. Honestly, I think it's like it sounds so funny, but it's just like removing fear. Like if
Mm.
you can sit and just like say all the what ifs are like stripped away. Like you don't have to worry about money. You don't have to worry about a studio space. You don't have to worry about like anything in the world. Everything is taken care of. Like what would you do? And it doesn't have to be a job that's created. It doesn't have to be something that exists. Like what calls you? And I think that removing those things is often like the most important because it's really difficult as adults to like you ask a kid what they want to do and they come up with the best things in the world, right? Because they have no concept of bills, no concept of like what it's
That's
like
so
to have
true.
like a lot of these responsibilities. So what if us as adults removed all responsibility? Like you don't have anybody to take care of but yourself and you have all the money in the world. What would you do? And I think from there, you can really come up with like really what's deep in your heart. And what I love about this new generation is like they're creating their own jobs. It's so cool. Like I remember going to a
It is.
guidance counselor in high school and them being like, okay, so here's the 4 things that you're going to be able to do and you grow up. And it was like be a hairdresser. Like it was like all the things that I didn't need good grades for and I could talk a lot. And it was just like, oh, it was stressful thinking I had to fit into like these boxes of like what someone's telling me I'm going to be. So, yeah, just remove everything, strip it all away. And I got to say
I
one thing because this is who I like have taken as like my inspiration for my kids because we're all big Wu-Tang fans. And I always like tell like my son, I'm like, do you think old dirty bastard cares that his voice cracks or that people don't like his voice? And I always say to like my daughter, I'm like, you think old dirty bastard feels like he's overwhelming to some people? Do you think he lets people dim his light? Like,
Oh my
no,
God.
he's like, you know what I mean? And it's just like, yeah, those are like the people
I'm
that
here for
we
it.
need to like, right? It's like they shine. They shine. He shines.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that's it. That's what we all need to strive to be like, in that
But you
sense
know
of like
what?
living without fear.
I love your response because the whole idea of asking yourself, what would you want to do if we could take
Mm,
everything away? Take away the bills,
mm,
take away every roadblock, every obstruction that could possibly exist. What would you do with your days? That's such a good way to look at it because fear prevents us from so much. Fear becomes a roadblock in and of itself. So to kind
mhm,
of take that step back and remove fear from the equation, that's an awesome way to kind of figure out what your dream would be, what your passion would be, and try to kind of build towards it. And I think one thing to note is that you don't necessarily always have to go all in. You just have to take the first step. And then after that,
Totally.
every step kind of it follows, right? So that's just something
Yeah.
important to note. Now, final question that we're
Yeah.
tossing out.
Hmm.
Now that you have successfully pursued your dreams, looking back, what would you say to other mothers who might be hesitant or unsure of taking the leap? They might be fearful of like balancing entrepreneurship or just even just balancing taking on that like that big job that they've been dreaming of, that they know it might take a little bit more time or effort. What encouragement or wisdom can you share for people who are trying to find their passion amidst parenthood?
Oh, I would
I know it's a
say,
big question.
yeah, but it's such an important one. I would say, like, again, like, strip it all away. Like, don't think about, oh, how would this affect my kids, or how would this, or how would this, because all of those things, they do work out later. And everything is able to be customized nowadays. Like, there's nothing that has to be one way. And just because it works well for one way doesn't mean like you can't change that and you can't disrupt
Yeah.
that and shake it up, right? So literally take out everything and start, like what you said, one step at a time. And then you can start like taking on more things. But I think like, sorry, I'm trying to remember like what finding your passion and then what would you say? Honestly, I would say I wish that I had followed this a little bit more. I'm really like feeling like I'm diving deep into it now. But is the notion that like if things are comfortable and easy, you're probably just coasting. And if when you're like
Mm,
really scared and when you're really feeling like you're drowning and underwater, that is actually a really good sign because you are growing and it's only from your mistakes. You actually can't grow without making mistakes. You can't grow without those feelings. And so the fear and all of that kind of stuff, that's like where transformations happen. And I'm a big advocate of like there's no such thing as breakdowns, but only breakthroughs. So really just like trust in yourself and honestly take that leap and be okay to just like ride that wave and let things flow. Don't feel like it has to have a plan and you have to achieve it. You just, like you said, take the step and ride that wave because when we get out of our own way, like the best things happen. Like life actually has more important
hmm
things planned for us than we could even dream of. So
right.
it's just keep going on with that journey and like really it's always going to be more, how do I say this? It's better things will happen to us than we could even imagine, to be honest. It's
Right.
going to be more than we could even think of if we just allow, allow. And like moms especially receive. We don't receive, we are givers. Allow yourself to receive.
That's
And
true.
so yeah.
We're allowed to prioritize ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love what you said to kind of wrap it up, that when it comes to pursuing passions, when it comes to pursuing that dream, you have to, one, be able to let go of the fear. That's a major
Mhm.
roadblock, let it go. But also, two, understand that there isn't a linear path to success. Success comes in all different sizes and packages, and that sometimes we'll make mistakes, and that's okay. We learn from them, we take the lessons, and we keep building. And that's
Yeah.
an important lesson for us as parents, as moms, but also an important lesson that we can share with our kids as well, that it's okay to chase your dream. It's okay to take a chance. And it's okay to make a mistake and learn from it. The most important part is
Yeah.
learning from it.
Yes,
Well, I
100%.
thank you so much, Ellie. This conversation was amazing today, and I think there's so much that the audience can take from it. So, thank you so much for being a guest on Mother Hustlers. And we appreciate all the wisdom, insights, and just your vulnerability of sharing your experiences with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for creating this podcast. It's so needed. And I just feel very honored to be on it. So I appreciate you. Thank you.